Hey there, weary traveler of the digital realm. Tonight, we're embarking on a journey not to the blood-soaked arenas or marble-columned temples of ancient Rome, but to something far more methodical, something that will wrap around your consciousness like a warm, heavy blanket made of parchment and bureaucratic procedure. Before we begin our slow descent into the remarkably unremarkable world of Roman legal administration, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. There's something oddly comforting about knowing we're all drifting through this together, scattered across time zones, but united in our appreciation for the beautifully mundane details of ancient civilization. If you find yourself drawn to these kinds of gentle, methodical explorations of history's quieter corners, consider subscribing, but only if it truly brings you that peculiar peace that comes from learning about things that happen very, very slowly, over very, very long periods of time. Now settle in, adjust your pillow, maybe turn on a fan for that soft, consistent hum that makes everything feel just a little more distant and dreamlike. Because tonight, we're going to explore the laws of ancient Rome, not the dramatic trials or the spectacular punishments you might expect, but the endless, repetitive, beautifully boring machinery that kept an empire running for over 1,000 years. Picture, if you will, a small room in the Forum Romanum on a Tuesday morning in the year 127 CE. The sun filters through a narrow window, casting a rectangle of pale light across a wooden desk where a scribe named Marcus Flavius sits, his stylus moving with practiced precision across a wax tablet. He is recording, for the third time this week, the exact procedures for registering a minor property dispute between two citizens whose names will be forgotten by history. The stylus makes a soft scratching sound. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch, scratch, pause. This is the rhythm of Roman law in action, not the thunderous rhetoric of Cicero or the dramatic pronouncements of emperors, but the quiet, persistent sound of bureaucracy turning the wheels of justice at the speed of dried ink. Marcus dips his reed pen into a small ceramic inkwell. The ink is made from soot and gum mixed with water in proportions that have been standardized by Regulation 47.3.12 of the Codex Administrativus. He knows this number because he has written it out, in full, no fewer than 837 times in his career. Today we'll make it 838. The document he's preparing is a standard Form 7b, which is used for property disputes involving parcels of land smaller than 3 jugera but larger than 1½ jugera, provided the disputed area does not contain a well, a shrine, or any fruit-bearing trees older than 7 years. If it contains any of these elements, then it becomes a Form 7c, which requires a different ink mixture, a different quality of papyrus, and the signature of a different magistrate entirely. Marcus has been a legal scribe for 14 years, 2 months, and 16 days. He knows this precisely because Roman administrative law requires him to track his tenure for pension calculations that will be relevant in approximately 31 years. Assuming he lives that long, and assuming the empire continues to exist in its current form, and assuming the pension system doesn't undergo any of the periodic reforms that have been proposed, debated, and tabled 17 times since he began his career. The case before him today involves a dispute over a boundary marker. Gaius Lucius Maximus claims that his neighbor, Titus Flavius Cornelius, has moved a stone marker exactly 4 3/4 inches to the northeast, thereby claiming a strip of land approximately 2 feet wide and 17 feet long. This strip contains part of a grapevine, 3 olive tree saplings, and a small section of what might be either a path or a drainage ditch, depending on whether you classify it by its original purpose or its current usage. Roman law has very specific things to say about boundary markers. Chapter 12, Section 4, Subsection 7, Paragraph 3, Clause B of the Property Code specifies that boundary stones must be made of local limestone where available, or granite where limestone is not readily obtainable, or sandstone in regions where neither limestone nor granite can be procured within a reasonable distance, with reasonable distance being defined as no more than 2 days' travel by ox cart on roads of acceptable quality during the dry season. The stones must be carved with specific markings indicating the names of the property owners, the date of installation, and the authority under which the boundary was established. The carving must be done by a certified stoneworker who has completed the appropriate guild training and paid the relevant fees to the local aedile's office. The depth of the carving must be no less than 3 finger widths and no more than 4 finger widths, measured using the standard finger width measurement maintained by the Bureau of Weights and Measures in the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Marcus begins to write the date at the top of his form. In Roman legal documents, the date must be recorded in a very specific format. First, the year, calculated from the founding of Rome. Then, the names of the current consuls. Then, the month, using the traditional Roman calendar, which, even after Julius Caesar's reforms, remains wonderfully complicated. Then, the day of the month, but expressed not as a simple number but in relation to the kalends, nones, or ides, depending on which comes next. Today is the 4th day before the nones of Maius, in the year 880 from the founding of the city, during the consulship of Lucius, Nerva Traianus, and Marcus Annius Verus. Marcus writes this out in full because abbreviations are not permitted in official legal documents, except for a list of 47 specifically approved abbreviations that are listed in Appendix C of the Scribal Manual, which is updated every 3 years by a committee of senior clerks who meet for exactly 6 hours on the second Tuesday, following the Ides of Martius. The ink flows slowly from his pen. Roman ink has a particular consistency that must be maintained within very specific parameters. Too thick, and it will clog the pen and create irregular letter forms that could potentially be challenged in court as illegible. Too thin, and it will spread beyond the intended lines, possibly obscuring other text or creating ambiguous letter forms that could be misinterpreted by future readers. The Lex Scribendi, passed during the reign of Hadrian, specifies that all legal documents must be written in what is called the standard chancery hand, a particular style of lettering that took Marcus 2 full years to master. Each letter has a prescribed height, width, and spacing. The distance between words must be exactly 1 standard letter width. The distance between lines must be exactly 1 1/2 times the height of a standard letter. Marcus measures these distances using a small bronze ruler that is calibrated against the official standard ruler maintained in the office of the Praefectus Urbanus. This official ruler is, in turn, calibrated against the master standard ruler housed in the Temple of Janus, which is calibrated against the fundamental standard ruler that was allegedly blessed by Numa Pompilius himself, though historians have noted that this claim may be somewhat exaggerated. As Marcus writes, he must also consider the quality of his papyrus. Roman law specifies 3 grades of papyrus for legal documents, depending on the importance of the case. Grade A papyrus, made from the finest inner strips of the papyrus plant, is reserved for cases involving amounts greater than 10,000 denarii, or for disputes involving senators or their immediate families. Grade B papyrus, made from the middle strips, is used for cases involving amounts between 1,000 and 10,000 denarii, or for disputes involving citizens of the equestrian class. Grade C papyrus, made from the outer strips, is used for all other civil matters. The case of Gaius Lucius Maximus versus Titus Flavius Cornelius involves a piece of land valued at approximately 400 denarii, which places it firmly in the Grade C category. The papyrus Marcus is using has a slightly rough texture and a faint brownish color that indicates it was made from strips that were perhaps not quite as outer as they should have been, but not quite middle enough to qualify for Grade B status. This particular grade of papyrus is sometimes called Grade C+ by scribes, though this designation has no official recognition in the legal code. The stylus continues its steady rhythm: scratch, scratch, pause. Marcus forms each letter with deliberate care, knowing that any error will require him to start the entire document over again. Roman legal procedure does not permit corrections, erasures, or amendments to official documents. If a mistake is made, the entire document must be declared void, and the process must begin again from the beginning, using fresh materials and requiring new signatures from all relevant officials. This means that Marcus must maintain perfect concentration throughout the entire process of creating each document. A single misplaced letter, a single smudged word, a single dropped blot of ink in the wrong place, and hours of work must be discarded. The pressure of this requirement has led to the development of a particular form of scribal meditation, a state of focused calm that allows the mind to remain perfectly clear and the hand perfectly steady for extended periods. Marcus has developed his own ritual for maintaining this state. Before beginning each document, he arranges his materials in a specific pattern on his desk. The inkwell must be positioned exactly 2 hand widths to the right of the papyrus. The spare stylus must be placed parallel to the working stylus, separated by exactly 1 finger width. The small bowl of sand used for blotting must be positioned at the upper left corner of the workspace, but not so close that it might be accidentally knocked over by an elbow or sleeve. He takes 3 deep breaths, each breath lasting exactly the time it takes to mentally recite the opening words of the 12 tables. If a man is summoned to court and does not come, witnesses shall be called, and then he shall be seized. These words, carved in bronze and posted in the Forum more than 4 centuries ago, remain the foundation of all Roman legal procedure, and their rhythm has become the heartbeat of the entire legal system. The morning sun shifts slightly, moving the rectangle of light across Marcus's desk by perhaps half an inch. In a few hours, he will need to light an oil lamp to continue his work, but for now, the natural light is sufficient. Roman law specifies the minimum level of illumination required for the creation of legal documents, measured in terms of the ability to distinguish between similar letter forms at a distance of 1 cubit from the page. This standard was established after a series of cases in which important documents were challenged on the grounds that they had been written in insufficient light, leading to ambiguous letter forms that could be interpreted in multiple ways. The case file before Marcus contains 17 separate pieces of evidence, each of which must be summarized and referenced in his document. There are sworn statements from both parties to the dispute. There are statements from 3 witnesses who claim to have observed the original placement of the boundary stone. There are statements from 2 different surveyors who have measured the disputed area using the official surveying equipment maintained by the College of Augurs. There are records of previous property transfers involving both parcels of land. There are tax records showing the assessed value of both properties for the past 7 years. There are certificates of citizenship for both parties, required because only full Roman citizens can own land within the city boundaries. Each piece of evidence must be described in precise detail using the standard legal vocabulary that has evolved over centuries of legal practice. The Latin language used in Roman legal documents is not quite the same as the Latin spoken in the streets or used in literature. It is a specialized dialect filled with technical terms and phrases that have very specific meanings within the context of law. Marcus has spent years learning this vocabulary, and he continues to consult reference scrolls when he encounters unfamiliar terms or when he needs to verify the exact phrasing required for particular types of statements. The statement of Gaius Lucius Maximus, for example, must be introduced with the phrase Dixit Gaius Lucius Maximus, civis Romanus, filius Gaii, tribu Fabia inscriptus, which establishes not only his name, but his citizenship status, his father's name, and his tribal affiliation. This information is required because Roman law recognizes different categories of legal standing depending on citizenship status, family relationships, and tribal membership. A statement from a non-citizen would be introduced with different phrasing and would carry different legal weight. A statement from a citizen whose father was not also a citizen would require additional documentation. A statement from someone whose tribal affiliation could not be verified would need to be supported by additional witnesses. Marcus dips his pen again and continues writing. The ink flows steadily, forming the familiar curves and lines of Latin script. Each word appears on the papyrus with deliberate slowness, building the document letter by letter, word by word, line by line. This is how Roman law works, not through dramatic gestures or sudden revelations, but through the patient accumulation of properly documented facts, correctly formatted statements, and precisely worded conclusions. The dispute over the boundary stone will eventually be resolved, probably in favor of whichever party can produce the most convincing documentation. The strip of land will be awarded to one neighbor or the other. The grapevine and olive saplings will belong to someone. Life will continue much as it did before, except that there will be one more legal precedent in the vast archive of Roman case law, one more example of how the system processes disagreements and reaches decisions. But that resolution is still hours away. For now, there is only the steady rhythm of the stylus, the soft scratch of pen on papyrus, and the slow, methodical construction of justice, one carefully formed letter at a time. The afternoon brings with it a subtle shift in the quality of light filtering through the narrow window. Marcus notices this change not because it affects his work in any meaningful way, but because Roman legal procedure requires him to note the time of day at which each section of a document is completed. This notation must be made using the traditional Roman system of dividing daylight into 12 equal parts, regardless of the actual length of the day, which means that an hour in winter is considerably shorter than an hour in summer. Today, being in the month of Maius, the hours are approaching their maximum length. Marcus calculates that it is now approximately the 7th hour of the day, which means he has been working on this particular document for slightly more than 3 hours. Roman administrative regulations specify that no single document should require more than 6 hours to complete, unless it involves property worth more than 5,000 denarii, or unless it requires consultation with more than 2 different legal authorities, or unless it involves citizens from more than one province. The case of the boundary stone, fortunately, involves none of these complications. Both parties are citizens of Rome itself, the property in question is worth less than 500 denarii, and the relevant legal authorities are all located within the city. This means that Marcus can complete the entire process without leaving his small office, without requesting additional forms from other departments, and without waiting for responses from distant officials who might be traveling or attending to other duties. He reaches for his second stylus, the one he reserves for writing the names of witnesses. Roman law requires that witness names be written with a different implement than the one used for the main text as a protection against forgery. The theory is that if someone attempts to alter a document by adding false witness names, the difference in the writing instrument will be detectable by trained legal examiners. Marcus is not entirely convinced that this system works as intended, since most styluses are virtually identical, but the regulation has been in place for more than 60 years and shows no signs of being changed. The first witness is named Lucius Quintus Fabius. He is a neighbor who claims to have been present when the original boundary stone was installed 7 years ago. His statement, sworn before a local magistrate and sealed with his personal signet ring, attests that the stone was placed exactly where Gaius Lucius Maximus claims it was placed, and that Titus Flavius Cornelius has indeed moved it from its original position. Marcus must copy this statement word for word, exactly as it was recorded by the magistrate who took the original testimony. Roman legal procedure does not permit paraphrasing or summarizing of witness statements. Every word must be reproduced precisely, including any repetitions, clarifications, or corrections that were made during the original testimony. If Lucius Quintus Fabius said, "I saw the stone placed there, no, I mean here, at this location," then Marcus must write, "I saw the stone placed there, no, I mean here, at this location," rather than simply writing, "I saw the stone placed at this location." This requirement for exact reproduction has led to some remarkably long and convoluted witness statements. Marcus once worked on a case where a witness had attempted to correct himself so many times during his testimony that the final statement was more than 3 times longer than it needed to be, filled with false starts, retractions, and clarifications that made the witness's actual meaning nearly impossible to determine. Nevertheless, every word had to be copied into the official record because the law permits no deviation from the original testimony. The second witness is named Gaius Antonius Maximus. He is not related to Gaius Lucius Maximus, despite sharing part of his name. Roman naming conventions, which require most citizens to carry 3 names plus various additional designations indicating family relationships, tribal affiliations, and sometimes adoptions or honors, frequently result in multiple people sharing portions of their names without being related. Marcus has learned to pay careful attention to the full names and genealogical information, because confusing 2 people with similar names can invalidate an entire document. Gaius Antonius Maximus claims to have measured the disputed area using his own surveying equipment, and he states that the current position of the boundary stone differs from its position, as recorded in the official property survey conducted when the land was originally divided. His statement includes precise measurements given in the traditional Roman units of feet, cubits, and paces, with conversions to the newer standardized measurements that were introduced during the reign of Augustus and updated during the reign of Hadrian. Roman surveying is governed by an extensive set of regulations that specify not only how measurements should be taken, but also what equipment should be used, what qualifications the surveyor should possess, and how the results should be recorded. The basic unit of measurement is the Roman foot, which is defined as exactly 16 finger widths, with the finger width being determined by the standard finger maintained in the Temple of Jupiter. This standard finger is actually a bronze casting made from the index finger of a long-dead senator, whose finger was selected for this purpose because it was deemed to be of average size for a Roman citizen. Surveying equipment must be calibrated against official standards at least once per year, or more frequently if it is used for disputes involving valuable property. The calibration process involves comparing the surveyor's measuring rods against the official rods maintained by the College of Augurs, and obtaining a certificate of accuracy that must be renewed annually. Surveyors who use equipment that has not been properly calibrated can face fines, loss of their professional license, and in extreme cases, criminal charges for fraud. The third witness is named Marcus Flavius Cornelius. Marcus the scribe pauses for a moment when he encounters this name because it is remarkably similar to his own name, and because the witness shares a family name with one of the parties to the dispute. Roman law requires that any potential conflicts of interest be noted in the official record, even if they are purely coincidental. Marcus must therefore add a notation explaining that he, Marcus Flavius, the scribe, is not related to Marcus Flavius Cornelius, the witness, and that neither of them is related to Titus Flavius Cornelius, one of the parties to the dispute. This notation requires him to consult his genealogical records, which every Roman citizen is required to maintain. These records, inscribed on bronze tablets and updated whenever births, deaths, marriages, or adoptions occur within the family, trace family relationships back at least 7 generations. Marcus's records show that his family originated in the province of Gaul, while the witness Marcus Flavius Cornelius comes from a family that has lived in Rome itself for at least 4 generations. The defendant Titus Flavius Cornelius appears to be descended from a family that originated in the Greek cities of southern Italy. The process of verifying these genealogical relationships involves cross-referencing multiple sets of records maintained by different government offices. The Bureau of Vital Statistics maintains birth and death records. The Office of Marriage Contracts maintains records of all legal marriages. The Department of Adoptions maintains records of all legal adoptions. The Census Office maintains records of all citizens and their family relationships. Each of these offices maintains its records in a slightly different format, using slightly different terminology, and organized according to slightly different principles. Marcus must request copies of the relevant records from each office, pay the appropriate fees for each request, and wait for the records to be copied and certified by the appropriate officials. This process typically takes between 3 and 7 days, depending on how busy the various offices are and whether any of the records are stored in archives that are not immediately accessible. During this waiting period, work on the case must be suspended, because Roman legal procedure does not permit any document to be completed until all necessary verifications have been obtained. While he waits for the genealogical verifications, Marcus can begin preparing the other sections of his document. The legal analysis section requires him to identify all relevant laws, regulations, and precedents that apply to the case. For a boundary dispute of this type, the primary authority is the lex terrae dividendi, a comprehensive law governing property boundaries that was originally passed during the reign of Augustus and has been amended 17 times since then. The lex terrae dividendi consists of 47 chapters, each divided into multiple sections, subsections, and clauses. Chapter 12, which deals specifically with boundary stones, contains 8 sections, 23 subsections, and 79 individual clauses. Marcus must identify which specific clauses apply to this particular case, and he must cite them using the proper legal citation format. which includes not only the chapter, section, and clause numbers, but also the year in which each provision was enacted or last amended. The citation format itself is governed by the regulae citandi, a set of rules that specify exactly how legal authorities should be referenced in official documents. The basic format requires the name of the law, followed by the relevant chapter and section numbers, followed by the date of enactment, followed by any subsequent amendments, followed by a reference to the official compilation in which the current version of the law can be found. For example, a citation to Clause 3 of subsection 7 of Section 4 of Chapter 12 of the Lex Terrae Dividendi would be written as Lex Terrae Dividendi, Capituis, Sector 4, Subsect 7, Slumber 3, enacted AUC 746, amended AUC 753, 761, 774, and 802, as compiled in Digestum Legum Territorialium, Volume 3, Piger 847. This citation must be written out in full every time the provision is referenced, because abbreviations are not permitted in legal documents except for the 47 specifically approved abbreviations listed in the scribal manual. The process of locating and verifying these citations requires Marcus to consult multiple legal reference works. The primary source is the Digestum Legum Territorialium, a comprehensive compilation of all laws relating to property and land use. This work consists of 12 volumes, each containing approximately 800 pages of closely written text. The volumes are organized chronologically by the date of enactment, with cross-references to related provisions in other volumes. Marcus also consults the Commentarii Juridici, a collection of legal commentary written by prominent jurists over the past 2 centuries. These commentaries explain how various laws have been interpreted by the courts, and they provide examples of how similar cases have been decided in the past. The commentarii consist of 36 volumes, organized by topic rather than chronologically, with extensive cross-references and indexes. In addition to these primary sources, Marcus has access to several specialized reference works. The Catalogus Precedentium contains summaries of important legal precedents, organized by type of case and by the legal principles involved. The Manuale Practicorum provides practical guidance for legal practitioners, including sample documents, standard phrases, and procedural checklists. The Lexicon Juridicum defines technical legal terms and explains their precise meanings within different legal contexts. Each of these reference works is updated periodically as new laws are passed and new precedents are established. The update process involves teams of scribes who review all recent legal developments and prepare supplementary volumes that are distributed to legal offices throughout the empire. Marcus's office receives these updates approximately twice per year, and he is required to file them in the proper locations within his reference collection and to update his indexes accordingly. The filing system itself is governed by detailed regulations that specify exactly how legal documents and reference materials should be organized and stored. Documents are filed chronologically within subject categories. With separate files for different types of cases, each file must be labeled with a standardized identification system that includes the year, the type of case, the names of the parties, and a sequential number indicating the order in which the case was received. The labeling must be done using ink of a specific composition and color, applied with a brush of a specific size and shape, in letters of a specific height and spacing. The labels must be placed in a specific location on each file, and they must be oriented in a specific direction. Files that are not properly labeled can be rejected by the filing clerks and returned to the originating office for correction. Marcus keeps a careful log of all the files in his office, noting when each case was received, when work on it began, when various steps in the process were completed, and when the final document was submitted to the appropriate authorities. This log is maintained on specially prepared tablets that are replaced every 6 months and archived in the Central Records Repository. The log entries must be made using a specific format with standardized abbreviations for common types of information. The afternoon light continues to shift across his desk as Marcus works methodically through the citation process. Each legal reference must be verified by consulting the original source, checking the accuracy of the citation format, and confirming that the reference provision has not been repealed or superseded by more recent legislation. This verification process is time-consuming but essential because incorrect legal citations can provide grounds for appealing a legal decision. As he writes, Marcus maintains the same careful rhythm that has characterized his work throughout the morning. Each letter is formed with deliberate precision. Each word is spelled according to the standardized orthography established by the Imperial Academy of Letters. Each sentence is constructed according to the grammatical rules specified in the official style manual for legal documents. The style manual itself is a fascinating document containing detailed rules about sentence structure, vocabulary choices, and rhetorical organization. Legal sentences, for example, should not exceed 40 words in length unless the complexity of the subject matter requires longer constructions. Passive voice constructions are preferred over active voice in most contexts because they emphasize the actions being described rather than the individuals performing them. Technical terms should be defined the first time they appear in a document using the standard definitions provided in the Lexicon Juridicum. Marcus pauses occasionally to flex his fingers and rest his eyes. The work requires intense concentration, and even experienced scribes can develop fatigue that leads to errors. Roman law recognizes this problem and requires scribes to take regular breaks during the preparation of long documents. The breaks must be at least 10 minutes long, but no more than 15 minutes long, and they must occur at least once every 2 hours, but no more than once every hour and a half. During his breaks, Marcus is not permitted to work on other documents or to engage in activities that might tire his eyes or hands. He usually spends the time walking slowly around the small courtyard adjacent to his office, breathing the fresh air and allowing his mind to rest. Sometimes he drinks a cup of watered wine or eats a small piece of bread, but he's careful not to consume anything that might affect his concentration or his manual dexterity. The regulation of these breaks is just one example of the comprehensive attention to detail that characterizes Roman legal administration. Every aspect of the legal process, from the preparation of documents to the conduct of trials to the enforcement of judgments, is governed by specific rules that have been developed and refined over centuries of practice. These rules are designed to ensure consistency, accuracy, and fairness in the administration of justice. But they also create a system that is remarkably complex and time-consuming. Marcus returns to his work refreshed and ready to continue with the next section of his document. The legal analysis is now complete, and he must move on to the factual summary, which will describe the disputed area in precise detail and explain exactly what each party claims happened to the boundary stone. This section requires him to synthesize information from multiple sources, including the statements of the parties, the testimony of witnesses, the reports of surveyors, and the relevant property records. The factual summary must be written in strictly neutral language that does not favor either party to the dispute. Marcus cannot describe the boundary stone as having been moved by Titus Flavius Cornelius, because that would imply that Titus Flavius Cornelius actually did move it, which is precisely what the legal process is designed to determine. Instead, he must write that Gaius Lucius Maximus alleges that the boundary stone has been moved by Titus Flavius Cornelius, while Titus Flavius Cornelius denies this allegation and maintains that the stone remains in its original position. This requirement for neutral language extends to every aspect of the factual summary. Marcus cannot describe either party as honest or dishonest, as reliable or unreliable, as credible or incredible. He cannot characterize any piece of evidence as convincing or unconvincing, as strong or weak, as reliable or questionable. He must simply describe what each piece of evidence contains and who provided it, leaving any evaluation of its worth to the magistrate who will ultimately decide the case. The neutral language requirement is enforced by a system of review that subjects every legal document to examination by senior clerks before it is submitted to the deciding authority. These reviewers are trained to identify any language that might be considered biased or prejudicial, and they have the authority to require revisions before a document can be accepted as complete. Documents that contain biased language can be rejected entirely, requiring the scribe to begin the entire process over again. Marcus has learned to write in this neutral style naturally, after years of practice and occasional corrections from reviewers. He thinks in terms of allegations and denials, claims and counterclaims, evidence presented and evidence disputed. The factual world becomes a collection of competing narratives, each supported by various types of documentation, with the ultimate truth to be determined through the careful application of established legal principles. The sun has now moved far enough across the sky that the rectangle of light on Marcus's desk has shifted significantly. Soon he will need to light his oil lamp to continue working, but for now the natural light remains adequate. The oil for the lamp must be of a specific grade and purity, because inferior oil can produce smoke that might damage legal documents or create fumes that could affect a scribe's concentration. The oil is supplied by the government and distributed to legal offices according to a schedule that takes into account the length of days during different seasons. The lamp itself is a standard design specified by the Bureau of Administrative Equipment. It must be made of bronze with a wick of a specific thickness and composition. The flame must be adjusted to provide adequate illumination without producing excessive heat that might cause ink to dry too quickly or papyrus to become brittle. Scribes are trained in the proper maintenance and operation of these lamps as part of their basic professional education. As the day progresses toward evening, Marcus continues his methodical work, building the document word by word, citation by citation, fact by fact. The boundary stone dispute will eventually be resolved, justice will be served according to the established procedures, and another small piece of the vast machinery of Roman law will have completed its function. But for now, there is only the steady rhythm of the stylus, the careful formation of letters, and the slow, patient construction of legal certainty in a world where certainty is the most precious commodity of all. The evening brings with it the familiar ritual of lamplighting, a process that Marcus approaches with the same methodical precision that governs every other aspect of his professional duties. Roman Administrative Regulation 23.7.4 specifies that oil lamps used in legal offices must be lit using a bronze lighter that has been blessed by a priest of Vesta and certified by the Bureau of Fire Safety. The lighter itself must be maintained according to a strict schedule, with the wick trimmed every 7 days and the oil reservoir cleaned every 14 days. Marcus reaches for his lighter, a small bronze implement that he inherited from his predecessor, a scribe named Gaius Octavius Secundus, who served in this same office for 22 years, before retiring to a small villa outside the city. The lighter bears the official seal of the Bureau of Fire Safety, stamped into the bronze on the day it was certified, along with a small inscription indicating the date of its last inspection. The inspection was conducted exactly 43 days ago by an official whose name Marcus has forgotten, but whose signature remains clearly visible in the certification documents filed in drawer 7 of his administrative cabinet. The process of lighting the lamp requires Marcus to follow a specific sequence of steps that were established by the Fire Safety Code during the reign of Tiberius, and have remained unchanged for more than 90 years. First, he must verify that the oil level in the lamp is between the minimum and maximum marks etched into the bronze reservoir. Too little oil and the lamp will burn out before the day's work is complete. Too much oil and the flame will burn too brightly, potentially damaging documents or creating excessive heat in the small office. The oil itself is a carefully regulated substance produced by licensed manufacturers who must demonstrate that their product meets the 17 different quality standards established by the Imperial Oil Commission. The oil used in legal offices is designated as Grade B Premium, which means it has been refined to remove impurities that might cause irregular burning or excessive smoke. Each batch of oil is tested by government inspectors who verify its purity, consistency, and burning characteristics before it is approved for use in official buildings. Marcus opens the small ceramic jar that contains his daily allotment of oil. The jar bears a wax seal indicating that it was filled this morning by the office oil steward, a man named Lucius Antonius Felix, who has held this position for 8 years and who takes considerable pride in the precision with which he measures each day's allocation. The oil steward maintains detailed records of oil consumption for each office, tracking usage patterns and identifying any irregularities that might indicate waste, theft, or equipment malfunction. The oil flows slowly from the jar into the lamp reservoir, its consistency thick enough to burn steadily, but not so thick as to clog the narrow channels through which it must flow. Marcus measures the oil level carefully, using the graduated marks on the reservoir to ensure that he adds exactly the right amount. Too much oil would be wasteful, a violation of the conservation regulations that require all government offices to minimize their consumption of resources. Too little oil would require him to refill the lamp later in the evening, interrupting his work and potentially causing delays in the completion of his document. The wick of the lamp is made from specially prepared cotton fibers that have been treated with a solution of salt water and allowed to dry in the sun for exactly 7 days. The treatment process removes impurities from the cotton and creates a wick that burns evenly without producing excessive smoke or requiring frequent trimming. The wicks are manufactured by a guild of specialized craftsmen who have maintained the same production methods for more than a century, passing their techniques from master to apprentice through a formal apprenticeship program that lasts 4 years. Marcus adjusts the wick to the proper height, using a small bronze tool designed specifically for this purpose. The wick must extend exactly 3/8 of an inch above the top of the wick tube, measured using the standard inch maintained by the Bureau of Weights and Measures. If the wick is too short, the flame will be weak and will not provide adequate illumination. If the wick is too long, the flame will be too large and will consume oil too quickly while producing smoke that could damage documents or irritate the scribe's eyes. The process of actually lighting the wick requires the use of a flint and steel striker that has been certified for use in government buildings. The striker must be operated according to a specific technique that generates sparks of the proper intensity without creating excessive heat that might damage nearby materials. Marcus strikes the flint against the steel 3 times, producing a shower of small sparks that fall onto a piece of char cloth positioned just below the wick. The char cloth ignites immediately, producing a small flame that Marcus carefully transfers to the wick using a thin bronze rod. The wick catches fire slowly, the flame growing gradually from a tiny flicker to a steady yellow glow. Marcus adjusts the flame to the proper height by raising or lowering the wick mechanism, a process that requires several small adjustments before the illumination reaches the level specified in the lighting regulations. The completed lighting process has taken approximately 12 minutes, which is within the acceptable range of 10 to 15 minutes specified in the administrative manual. Marcus records the lighting time in his daily log along with the amount of oil consumed and any observations about the quality of the flame or the condition of the equipment. This information will be compiled at the end of each month and submitted to the Bureau of Administrative Efficiency, where it will be analyzed as part of the ongoing effort to optimize the performance of government offices. With his lamp now providing adequate illumination, Marcus returns to his document. The factual summary section is nearing completion, and he must now begin work on the most complex part of the entire process, the legal reasoning section. This section requires him to explain how the relevant laws apply to the specific facts of the case, demonstrating the logical connection between the evidence presented and the conclusion that will be reached. Roman legal reasoning follows a highly structured format that was codified during the reign of Hadrian and has been refined through centuries of practice. The basic structure consists of 5 elements: the statement of the legal question, the identification of relevant authorities, the analysis of how those authorities apply to the facts, the consideration of any contrary arguments, and the conclusion that follows from the analysis. The legal question in this case is relatively straightforward. Has Titus Flavius Cornelius moved the boundary stone from its original position, as alleged by Gaius Lucius Maximus? Or does the stone remain where it was originally placed, as claimed by Titus Flavius Cornelius? However, even this apparently simple question involves several subsidiary issues that must be addressed separately. First, Marcus must establish what constitutes the original position of the boundary stone. This requires reference to the property survey that was conducted when the land was originally divided, the records of the stone's installation, and any subsequent surveys that may have been conducted. The relevant legal authority is Section 4 of Chapter 12 of the Lex Terrae Dividendi, which specifies that the original position of a boundary marker is established by the official survey conducted at the time of installation, unless that survey has been superseded by a subsequent official survey. The original survey was conducted 7 years ago by a licensed surveyor named Marcus Junius Brutus, who is not related to the famous Marcus Junius Brutus, who participated in the assassination of Julius Caesar despite sharing the same name. The surveyor Marcus Junius Brutus is still alive and still practicing his profession, and his original survey records are maintained in the archives of the College of Augurs. Marcus must request a certified copy of these records, pay the appropriate copying fee, and wait for the documents to be prepared and delivered to his office. The copying process for archived survey records is governed by detailed regulations that specify exactly how the documents must be reproduced. The copies must be made on papyrus of the same grade as the original documents, using ink of the same composition and color. Each page must be copied by hand, with every mark, notation, and diagram reproduced exactly as it appears in the original. The copying must be done by a certified copyist who has completed the appropriate training and passed the required examinations. Once the copying is complete, the documents must be reviewed by a senior archivist who compares the copies to the originals and certifies that they are accurate and complete. The certification process involves examining each page under adequate lighting, checking that all text is legible and correctly reproduced, and verifying that any diagrams or measurements are accurately copied. The archivist then applies an official seal to each page and signs a certificate of accuracy that accompanies the copied documents. The entire copying and certification process typically takes between 5 and 8 days, depending on the length and complexity of the documents being copied and the current workload of the archives office. During this waiting period, Marcus cannot complete the legal reasoning section of his document because Roman procedure requires that all evidence be verified and all authorities be properly documented before any legal conclusions can be drawn. While waiting for the survey records, Marcus can begin preparing other sections of his analysis. The second subsidiary issue involves determining what constitutes sufficient evidence that a boundary stone has been moved. Roman law recognizes several different types of evidence for this purpose, including eyewitness testimony, physical measurements, and documentary records. Each type of evidence is governed by different standards and carries different weight in legal proceedings. Eyewitness testimony is generally considered the strongest form of evidence, provided that the witnesses are credible and their testimony is consistent. Roman law defines a credible witness as a Roman citizen who is over the age of 14, who has never been convicted of perjury or fraud, who is not related to either party in the dispute, and who has no financial interest in the outcome of the case. The witness must also be able to demonstrate that he was actually present at the location in question and that he had adequate opportunity to observe the relevant events. The three witnesses in this case all appear to meet the basic credibility requirements, but Marcus must verify their status by consulting various official records. He must confirm their citizenship by checking the census rolls maintained by the Bureau of Vital Statistics. He must verify their ages by examining birth records, or if birth records are not available, by obtaining sworn statements from family members or other witnesses who can attest to their approximate ages. He must check criminal records to ensure that none of them has been convicted of perjury or fraud. He must examine their family genealogies to confirm that they are not related to either party in the dispute. This verification process requires Marcus to submit formal requests to multiple government offices, each of which maintains different types of records using different filing systems and different procedures. The Bureau of Vital Statistics maintains citizenship and birth records organized alphabetically by family name, with separate files for each generation. The Department of Criminal Justice maintains conviction records organized chronologically by date of conviction, with cross-references by name and by type of crime. The Office of Genealogical Records maintains family trees organized by tribal affiliation and geographic origin. Each office charges a different fee for providing certified copies of records, and each office has different processing times and different requirements for submitting requests. The Bureau of Vital Statistics requires requests to be submitted on Form 12A, written in black ink on Grade B papyrus, with the applicant's signature witnessed by a notary public. The Department of Criminal Justice requires requests to be submitted on Form 7C, written in brown ink on Grade A papyrus, with a wax seal applied using the applicant's personal signet ring. The Office of Genealogical Records requires requests to be submitted on Form 23B, written in blue ink on Grade C papyrus, with the applicant's tribal affiliation verified by a certificate from the appropriate tribal authority. Marcus spends the remainder of the afternoon preparing these various requests, carefully following the specific requirements for each office, and double-checking that he has used the correct forms, the correct ink colors, the correct grades of papyrus, and the correct authentication procedures. Each request must be copied in duplicate, with one copy retained in his files and the other submitted to the appropriate office along with the required fees. The fees themselves are calculated according to complex formulas that take into account the type of records being requested, the age of the records, the number of pages involved, and the urgency of the request. Standard processing typically takes 7 to 10 days and costs between 2 and 5 denarii per request, depending on the office involved. Expedited processing is available for an additional fee, but it is generally reserved for cases involving large amounts of money or important political figures. Marcus calculates that the total cost of obtaining all the necessary verifications will be approximately 18 denarii, which must be paid from the budget allocated to his office for case-related expenses. This budget is reviewed monthly by the Department of Financial Administration, which tracks spending patterns and investigates any unusual expenditures. Marcus must maintain detailed records of all expenses, including receipts for fees paid and explanations of why each expenditure was necessary for the proper handling of the case. The budget allocation itself is determined by a complex formula that takes into account the number of cases handled by each office, the average complexity of those cases, and the historical spending patterns of similar offices. The formula is recalculated annually based on data compiled from all legal offices throughout the empire, and budget allocations are adjusted accordingly. Offices that consistently spend more than their allocation may face reduced budgets in subsequent years, while offices that consistently spend less may receive increased allocations. Marcus submits his verification requests just before the end of the official business day, which is defined as the 10th hour after sunrise during the summer months and the 8th hour after sunrise during the winter months. The current time, being in the month of Maius, falls under the summer schedule, which means that the official business day ends when the sun reaches its 10th division of the daylight period. The timing of this submission is important because requests submitted after the end of the business day are not processed until the following day, which could delay the completion of his document by 24 hours or more. Roman administrative procedure is very strict about deadlines and processing times, and even small delays can have significant consequences for the parties involved in a legal dispute. As Marcus prepares to leave his office for the day, he performs the standard closing procedures required by Administrative Regulation 41.2.7. He must extinguish his oil lamp using the proper technique, which involves lowering the wick until the flame dies naturally rather than blowing it out, which could damage the wick or create smoke that might linger in the office overnight. He must secure all documents in the locked cabinet designated for active case files, using the bronze key that he wears on a chain around his neck. He must clean his writing implements using the prescribed cleaning solution and store them in their designated locations. The cleaning solution for styluses and pens is prepared according to a formula that has remained unchanged for more than 40 years. It consists of water mixed with a small amount of vinegar and a pinch of salt, combined in proportions that are specified down to the smallest measurable quantities. The solution must be prepared fresh each day and discarded each evening because Roman law prohibits the storage of cleaning solutions overnight due to the risk that they might spoil or become contaminated. Marcus cleans each implement carefully, removing all traces of ink and ensuring that the writing points are free of any debris that might affect their performance the following day. The cleaning process takes approximately 10 minutes and must be completed before he can lock his office and depart for home. The lock itself is a complex mechanism that requires a specific sequence of turns and movements to engage properly, and Marcus has practiced this sequence so many times that he can perform it without conscious thought. The walk home takes Marcus through several districts of the city, each with its own character and its own collection of shops, temples, and public buildings. He passes the Forum Boreum, where cattle merchants gather each morning to conduct their business according to regulations that govern everything from the health of the animals to the accuracy of the scales used to weigh them. He passes the Temple of Janus, where the master standards for weights and measures are maintained, and where citizens can bring their own measuring devices to be calibrated against the official standards. The streets themselves are governed by an extensive set of traffic regulations that specify which types of vehicles can use which streets at which times of day. Heavy carts and wagons are prohibited from the main thoroughfares during the busiest hours, and they must use designated routes that avoid the most congested areas. Pedestrians have the right-of-way on certain streets, but not on others, and there are specific penalties for blocking traffic or creating unnecessary delays. Marcus walks at a steady pace, neither hurrying nor dawdling, following the route that he has taken every working day for the past 14 years. The familiarity of the journey allows his mind to relax after the intense concentration required by his work, and he often uses this time to review the events of the day and to plan his activities for the following day. Tonight, he thinks about the boundary stone dispute and the various verifications that he has requested, calculating how long it will take to receive all the necessary documents and complete his analysis. His home is a modest apartment in a building that houses 6 families, each occupying 2 or 3 rooms depending on their means and the size of their households. Marcus lives alone, having never married, and his apartment consists of a single large room that serves as both living and sleeping space, plus a small alcove where he prepares his meals. The building is constructed according to the fire safety codes that were established after the Great Fire during Nero's reign, with stone walls, tile roofs, and multiple exits that allow residents to escape quickly in case of emergency. The evening meal is a simple affair, consisting of bread, cheese, olives, and watered wine. Marcus purchases his food from vendors who are licensed by the city government and who must comply with regulations governing the quality, freshness, and pricing of their products. The bread comes from a baker who specializes in the type of dense, nutritious loaves preferred by working people. The cheese is produced by a dairy cooperative that maintains herds of goats and cows in the countryside outside the city. The olives are imported from groves in southern Italy, where they are harvested according to traditional methods that have been used for centuries. After his meal, Marcus spends an hour reading from a collection of legal texts that he keeps in his apartment for reference and continuing education. Roman law requires all legal professionals to maintain their knowledge of current legal developments, and Marcus subscribes to a publication that summarizes new laws, regulations, and court decisions. The publication is issued monthly and contains approximately 20 pages of closely written text, organized by subject matter and cross-referenced to the major legal codes. Tonight, he reads about recent amendments to the property law that governs boundary disputes, noting several minor changes in procedure that may affect how such cases are handled in the future. The amendments are the result of recommendations made by a commission of senior jurists who spent 2 years studying the efficiency and effectiveness of current legal procedures. Their report, which runs to more than 300 pages, identifies numerous areas where small improvements could be made to reduce delays, minimize costs, and improve the accuracy of legal decisions. The reading requires careful attention because legal language is often subtle and complex, with important distinctions that may not be immediately apparent to casual readers. Marcus takes notes on the most significant changes using a personal notation system that he has developed over years of legal study. These notes will be filed with his other reference materials and will be consulted whenever he encounters cases that might be affected by the new procedures. As the evening progresses toward night, Marcus prepares for sleep by following the routine that has served him well throughout his career. He reviews his schedule for the following day, making mental notes of the tasks that must be completed and the deadlines that must be met. He arranges his clothing for the next day, ensuring that his tunic is clean and properly pressed and that his styluses and other tools are ready for use. He performs the brief evening prayers that are traditional in his family, asking for guidance in his work and protection for himself and his fellow citizens. Sleep comes gradually, brought on by the rhythmic sounds of the city settling into nighttime quiet. The boundary stone dispute will wait until tomorrow, along with all the other small legal problems that require patient attention and careful documentation. Somewhere in the empire, other scribes are performing similar duties, maintaining the vast network of laws and procedures that holds Roman civilization together. The work continues day after day, case after case, building the foundation of justice one carefully written document at a time. The morning will bring new challenges and new opportunities to serve the cause of legal order, but for now there is only the peaceful darkness and the quiet satisfaction of work well done, according to the ancient standards that have guided Roman law for centuries. In this simple cycle of daily labor and nightly rest, the empire finds its strength and its continuity. One scribe, one document, one small act of bureaucratic precision at a time. Tomorrow arrives with the same measured certainty that has marked every dawn in Rome for the past 880 years. Marcus awakens not to the dramatic clash of gladiators or the thunder of chariot wheels, but to the gentle scraping of his neighbor's stylus against wax, a sound that filters through the thin walls of the apartment building like a lullaby of administrative diligence. The morning light reveals the same rectangle of pale illumination across his small table, shifted perhaps a finger's width from yesterday's position due to the imperceptible progression of the seasons. This shift is noted as required by Regulation 15.2.8 of the Temporal Observation Code, in a small leather-bound journal that Marcus maintains for tracking seasonal variations in natural lighting conditions. The journal contains entries dating back 7 years, each one recording the precise position of the morning light at intervals of 3 days throughout the year. Marcus rises and performs his morning ablutions according to the hygiene standards established by the Public Health Ordinance of the year 823 from the founding of the city. The ordinance specifies that all government employees must wash their hands and face with soap made from olive oil and ash, mixed in proportions that have been standardized by the Guild of Soap Makers. The soap must be applied for a duration of no less than 30 heartbeats and no more than 50 heartbeats, counted according to the standard rhythm maintained by the official timekeepers in the Temple of Kronos. The water for washing is drawn from a ceramic pitcher that holds exactly 2 standard Roman measures, as verified by the bronze measuring cup that Marcus purchased from a licensed vendor 3 years ago. The measuring cup bears the official seal of the Bureau of Commercial Standards, certifying that its capacity conforms to the master standard maintained in the Temple of Jupiter. The water itself is supplied by the municipal aqueduct system, which delivers fresh water from mountain springs located approximately 47 miles northeast of the city. The aqueduct water is tested daily by government inspectors who verify its purity, clarity, and mineral content according to standards established during the reign of Augustus and updated twice since then. The testing process involves collecting samples from 17 different distribution points throughout the city, analyzing each sample using approved chemical procedures, and recording the results in standardized format on official testing forms. Any sample that fails to meet the established standards triggers an investigation to identify the source of contamination and implement corrective measures. Marcus dresses in his official tunic, a garment that was tailored according to specifications contained in the dress code for administrative personnel. The tunic is made from wool that has been woven to a specific thread count and dyed with a particular shade of brown that indicates his rank within the bureaucratic hierarchy. The dye is produced using a formula that requires precise measurements of oak bark, iron filings, and vinegar, combined according to proportions that have remained unchanged for 43 years. The tailoring of the tunic follows patterns that are maintained by the Guild of Government Tailors, with measurements that must conform to standard sizing charts based on the average physical dimensions of Roman citizens. The charts are updated every 10 years based on data collected during the census, which measures not only the number of citizens, but also their height, weight, and other physical characteristics that might be relevant for administrative purposes. Breakfast consists of bread, olive oil, and watered wine, consumed in quantities that are calculated according to the dietary guidelines established by the Commission on Nutritional Standards. The Commission, which meets twice yearly to review and update its recommendations, has determined that a male citizen engaged in sedentary work should consume approximately 12 ounces of bread, 2 ounces of olive oil, and 6 ounces of watered wine each morning, with variations permitted based on individual health conditions and seasonal availability of food supplies. The bread is purchased from a baker who operates under a license issued by the Municipal Authority for Food Production. The license requires the baker to use flour that meets specific quality standards, to maintain his ovens according to prescribed safety procedures, and to sell his products at prices that do not exceed the maximum rates established by the Price Control Board. The baker must also submit monthly reports documenting his flour purchases, his production volumes, and his sales receipts, which are reviewed by inspectors to ensure compliance with all relevant regulations. The olive oil comes from a merchant who specializes in products from the southern regions of Italy, where olive groves have been cultivated according to traditional methods for more than 2 centuries. The oil is transported to Rome in large ceramic jars that are sealed with wax and marked with stamps indicating the producer, the date of pressing, and the region of origin. Each shipment of oil is inspected upon arrival in the city, with samples tested for purity and quality before the merchant is permitted to sell the oil to consumers. The wine is produced in vineyards located in the hills surrounding Rome, where grape cultivation is regulated by the Agricultural Commission according to standards that specify which varieties of grapes may be grown, how the vines must be tended, and when the harvest may begin. The wine is diluted with water in a ratio of 1 part wine to 2 parts water, as recommended by medical authorities who believe that undiluted wine can cause digestive problems and impair mental clarity. Marcus completes his morning meal in approximately 25 minutes, a duration that falls within the recommended range of 20 to 30 minutes established by the guidelines for proper digestion. He then performs a brief review of his schedule for the day, consulting a wooden tablet on which he records his appointments, deadlines, and other professional obligations. The tablet is divided into sections representing the 12 hours of daylight, with additional space for noting tasks that may extend into the evening hours. Today's schedule includes completing the boundary stone document, assuming that the verification requests submitted yesterday have been processed successfully. It also includes beginning work on a new case involving a dispute over water rights between 2 farmers, whose properties are located along a small stream that flows through the countryside east of the city. The water rights case involves different legal authorities and different procedural requirements than the boundary stone case, but the basic principles of careful documentation and methodical analysis remain the same. Marcus gathers his writing materials and prepares to depart for his office. The writing materials include 3 styluses of different sizes, 2 reed pens, a small knife for sharpening the pens, a bronze ruler for measuring line spacing, a collection of wax tablets for making preliminary notes, and a leather satchel for carrying documents between his office and other government buildings. Each item is stored in a specific location within his apartment, arranged according to a system that allows him to locate any item quickly without wasting time searching. The journey to his office takes him through the same streets he has walked every working day for the past 14 years. The route is approximately 1,200 paces long, as measured using the standard Roman pace of 2½ feet. Marcus has never actually counted all the paces in a single journey, but he has measured several sections of the route and calculated the total distance based on those measurements. The calculation is recorded in his personal journal, along with observations about seasonal variations in walking time due to weather conditions and pedestrian traffic. The streets themselves are maintained according to standards established by the Department of Public Works, which specifies the types of stone that may be used for paving, the proper methods for installing drainage systems, and the frequency with which repairs must be performed. The main thoroughfares are paved with large, flat stones fitted together with such precision that the joints between them are barely visible. Side streets are paved with smaller stones arranged in geometric patterns that are both functional and aesthetically pleasing. Street cleaning is performed by municipal workers who follow schedules that ensure each section of the city is cleaned at least once every 3 days. The cleaning process involves sweeping debris into collection points, removing any obstacles that might impede traffic and washing the stones with water from specially designed carts that are pulled by donkeys. The water used for street cleaning is drawn from secondary aqueducts that carry water of slightly lower quality than that used for drinking, but which is still subject to regular testing and quality control measures. Marcus arrives at his office building at precisely the beginning of the second hour of daylight, as indicated by the sundial located in the small courtyard adjacent to the building. The sundial was installed by the Department of Temporal Measurement and is calibrated according to the official time standards maintained at the Central Observatory. The accuracy of the sundial is verified monthly by technicians who compare its readings to those of the master sundial located in the Forum Romanum. The office building itself is constructed according to specifications contained in the Building Code for Government Facilities, which governs everything from the thickness of the walls to the dimensions of the doorways to the materials used for roofing. The building contains 12 individual offices, each designed to accommodate one senior scribe plus any junior assistants who may be assigned to help with particularly complex cases. Marcus's office is located on the second floor in a corner position that provides natural light from 2 windows. The windows are fitted with wooden shutters that can be adjusted to control the amount of light entering the office, depending on the time of day and the type of work being performed. During the summer months, Marcus typically opens the shutters fully during the morning hours, adjusts them to a partially closed position during the midday hours when the sun is at its brightest, and opens them fully again during the afternoon hours. During the winter months, the shutters remain fully open throughout the day to maximize the available natural light. Marcus unlocks his office using the bronze key that he carries on a chain around his neck. The lock mechanism was installed by the Security Division of the Department of Administrative Services, and it conforms to standard specifications that ensure compatibility with master keys carried by senior supervisors and maintenance personnel. The key itself is stamped with Marcus's identification number and the number of his office, and it is registered in the Central Key Registry maintained by the Security Division. The office contains the same furniture and equipment that was present when Marcus first began working there 14 years ago. The wooden desk is positioned to take advantage of the natural light from both windows, with additional oil lamps available for use during evening hours or on particularly cloudy days. The chair is made from oak wood with a leather seat that has been repaired twice during Marcus's tenure, but which remains serviceable and comfortable for extended periods of sitting. Storage cabinets line 2 walls of the office, providing space for active case files, reference materials, blank forms, and various supplies needed for document preparation. The cabinets are made from cedar wood that has been treated with preservatives to protect against insects and moisture damage. Each cabinet is fitted with bronze locks that use keys similar to the main office key, and the contents of each cabinet are inventoried annually by clerks from the Department of Administrative Oversight. Marcus begins his day by reviewing the status of pending cases, consulting a master list that he maintains on a large wax tablet mounted on one wall of his office. The list contains the names of all parties involved in each case, the dates when various documents were submitted or requested, and the expected completion dates for each phase of the legal process. The list is updated daily as new information becomes available and as cases progress through the various stages of resolution. The boundary stone case remains in the verification phase, pending receipt of the genealogical records and survey documents that were requested yesterday. Marcus calculates that these documents should arrive sometime between today and the day after tomorrow, based on the standard processing times for the various government offices involved. Once all verifications are complete, he estimates that it will take approximately 2 additional days to complete the legal analysis and prepare the final document for submission to the deciding magistrate. The water rights case is just beginning, and Marcus must start by reviewing the initial complaint that was filed by one of the farmers. The complaint is written on standard legal papyrus using the prescribed format for property disputes, but it will need to be supplemented with additional documentation before the case can proceed. Marcus must request copies of property deeds, water usage permits, and survey records for both properties involved in the dispute, along with witness statements and expert opinions from qualified hydraulic engineers. The process of requesting these documents follows the same general procedures used for the boundary stone case, but with some variations specific to water rights disputes. The forms are slightly different, the fees are calculated according to a different schedule, and some of the verifications must be obtained from specialized agencies that deal specifically with water management and agricultural regulation. Marcus has handled several water rights cases during his career, so he is familiar with these procedures, but he must still consult his reference manuals to ensure that he follows all current requirements. Marcus spends the first hour of his workday preparing the initial document requests for the water rights case. This involves filling out 6 different forms, each requiring specific information about the parties to the dispute, the nature of the property involved, and the type of documentation being requested. The forms must be completed using black ink on grade B papyrus, with the applicant's signature witnessed by a notary public and authenticated with an official seal. The information required for the forms comes from the original complaint and from preliminary interviews that were conducted with both farmers by a junior clerk from the Department of Agricultural Disputes. The interviews are recorded in standardized format with questions and answers transcribed verbatim and signed by both the interviewer and the person being interviewed. The transcripts provide the basic facts needed to begin the formal legal process, but they must be supplemented with additional evidence before any conclusions can be drawn. As Marcus works on the forms, he maintains the same careful attention to detail that characterizes all of his professional activities. Each letter is formed with deliberate precision, each word is spelled according to the standardized orthography, and each sentence is constructed according to the grammatical rules specified in the style manual for legal documents. The forms themselves are designed to minimize the possibility of errors, with specific spaces for each piece of required information and clear instructions for how each section should be completed. The completion of the forms takes approximately 90 minutes, including time for reviewing each form to ensure accuracy and completeness. Marcus then prepares to submit the forms to the appropriate offices, calculating the fees that must be paid, and gathering the necessary payment vouchers from his administrative supplies. The total cost for all 6 requests will be approximately 23 denarii, which must be charged against the budget allocation for his office. Before leaving to submit the forms, Marcus performs a routine check of his oil lamp to ensure that it is properly maintained and ready for use later in the day. The wick appears to be in good condition, showing no signs of fraying or uneven burning that might affect the quality of the flame. The oil level in the reservoir is adequate for approximately 6 hours of continuous use, which should be sufficient for the remainder of the workday unless he needs to work unusually late to complete urgent tasks. The bronze lighter shows no signs of damage or wear that might affect its operation, and the flint appears to have sufficient material remaining for several dozen more lightings before it will need to be replaced. The steel striker is clean and free of rust, indicating that it has been properly maintained according to the prescribed cleaning schedule. All of the lighting equipment appears to be in satisfactory working condition, ready to provide adequate illumination when natural light becomes insufficient. Marcus locks his office and begins the journey to the various government buildings where he must submit his document requests. The first stop is the Office of Property Records, located in a building approximately 4 blocks from his own office. The route takes him through 2 different administrative districts, each with its own character and its own collection of government buildings, commercial establishments, and residential areas. The Office of Property Records occupies the ground floor of a 3-story building that also houses the Bureau of Taxation and the Department of Census Administration. The building was constructed during the reign of Trajan according to the architectural standards that were established for government facilities during that period. The facade is made from travertine limestone quarried from sites north of the city, and the interior walls are faced with brick made from clay obtained from deposits along the Tiber River. Marcus enters the building through the main entrance, which is guarded by 2 uniformed attendants who verify the identity of all visitors and ensure that only authorized personnel are permitted access to the various offices. The guards examine Marcus's identification documents and consult a register of approved visitors before allowing him to proceed to the Office of Property Records. The identification process takes approximately 3 minutes and follows procedures that have been standardized throughout all government buildings in the city. The Office of Property Records is a large room containing rows of wooden filing cabinets, each labeled with bronze plaques indicating the types of documents stored within. The cabinets are arranged according to a classification system that organizes property records by geographic location, date of creation, and type of property involved. A team of clerks maintains the filing system, ensuring that new documents are properly classified and stored and that requested documents can be located quickly and efficiently. Marcus approaches the service counter where a clerk named Gaius Fabius Maximus reviews his request forms and calculates the appropriate fees. The clerk is a middle-aged man who has worked in the Office of Property Records for 18 years and who takes considerable pride in his knowledge of the filing system and his ability to locate even the most obscure documents. He examines Marcus's forms carefully, checking that all required information has been provided and that the forms have been completed according to current procedures. The fee calculation involves consulting a rate schedule that specifies different charges for different types of documents, with additional fees for expedited processing and for documents that require special handling. The base fee for property deed copies is 3 denarii per document, plus 1 denarius for certification and authentication. Survey records cost 4 denarii per document, plus 2 denarii for copies of any associated maps or diagrams. Water usage permits cost 2 denarii per document, plus 1 denarius for verification of current status. Marcus pays the required fees using bronze coins from his official expense fund, receiving a receipt that must be retained for accounting purposes. The receipt is written on a small piece of papyrus and stamped with the official seal of the Office of Property Records, along with the date and time of the transaction. The clerk estimates that the requested documents will be ready for pickup in approximately 5 to 7 days, depending on the complexity of the research required and the current workload of the document preparation staff. The next stop is the Department of Water Management, located in a building on the opposite side of the administrative district. The journey takes Marcus through a section of the city that specializes in government services, with numerous buildings housing various departments, bureaus, and offices that support the administrative functions of the empire. The streets in this area are wider than those in residential districts, designed to accommodate the heavy pedestrian traffic generated by citizens conducting official business. The Department of Water Management is responsible for regulating all aspects of water usage throughout the territory controlled by Rome, including the allocation of water rights, the maintenance of irrigation systems, and the resolution of disputes between users. The department maintains extensive records documenting water sources, usage patterns, and legal agreements between various parties, who depend on water for agricultural, commercial, or domestic purposes. Marcus presents his request forms to a clerk named Lucius Antonius Severus, who specializes in water rights documentation for agricultural properties. The clerk reviews the forms and explains that the requested documents will require research in 3 different archives, since the water rights for the disputed properties have been modified several times over the past 15 years. The research process will involve examining original water allocation agreements, subsequent modifications to those agreements, and records of any previous disputes involving the same water sources. The fee structure for water rights documentation is more complex than that used by the Office of Property Records, because the charges vary depending on the age of the documents, the number of modifications that have been made to the original agreements, and the amount of research required to compile a complete record. The clerk calculates that the total cost for the requested documentation will be approximately 12 denarii, including fees for research, copying, and certification. Marcus pays the required fees and receives a receipt similar to the one provided by the Office of Property Records. The clerk estimates that the water rights documentation will be ready for pickup in approximately 7 to 10 days, because the research will require consultation with archived records that are stored in a facility located outside the city. The archived records must be retrieved by special courier and transported to the main office before the research can begin. The third and final stop is the Bureau of Agricultural Surveys, which maintains records of all official surveys conducted on agricultural properties throughout the region. The Bureau is located in a smaller building that houses several specialized agencies dealing with rural and agricultural matters. The building is constructed in a simpler style than the larger government buildings, but it follows the same basic safety and security standards required for all facilities that house official records. The clerk at the Bureau of Agricultural Surveys is a young man named Marcus Junius Silanus, who has been working in this position for only 6 months. He is still learning the complex filing system used by the Bureau, and he must consult with a senior supervisor before he can process Marcus's request. The supervisor, a woman named Claudia Antonia Tertia, reviews the request forms and explains that the requested survey records are stored in 2 different locations, depending on when the surveys were conducted. Surveys conducted within the past 5 years are stored in the main filing system within the Bureau's offices. Surveys conducted more than 5 years ago are transferred to a secondary storage facility, where they are maintained in a compressed filing system that requires special procedures for retrieval and copying. The surveys requested by Marcus fall into both categories, which means that the processing will require coordination between the main office and the secondary storage facility. The fee calculation for survey records involves a base charge for each survey, plus additional charges for copying maps and diagrams, plus special handling fees for records that must be retrieved from secondary storage. The total cost for Marcus's request is calculated at approximately 8 denarii, which is somewhat lower than the fees charged by the other offices, but which still represents a significant expense that must be carefully tracked for budget purposes. Marcus pays the required fees and receives his receipt, noting that the estimated processing time is approximately 6 to 8 days. The clerk explains that the processing time may be extended if the records in secondary storage are difficult to locate or if they require special conservation measures before they can be safely copied. Some older survey records are stored on papyrus that has become fragile with age, and they must be handled by specialists who are trained in document preservation techniques. With all 3 requests submitted, Marcus begins the return journey to his office. The total cost for all the document requests has been 43 denarii, which represents approximately 1/3 of his monthly budget allocation for case-related expenses. He must now update his expense records and prepare a report documenting the necessity of each expenditure, which will be reviewed by the Department of Financial Administration as part of their monthly audit process. The return journey takes approximately 25 minutes, during which Marcus reviews his progress on both active cases and plans his activities for the remainder of the day. The Boundary Stone case remains on hold, pending receipt of verification documents, but he can begin preparing preliminary analyses of the legal issues involved. The water rights case is now in the initial documentation phase, and he can use the waiting period to research relevant legal precedents and begin drafting the framework for his eventual analysis. Back in his office, Marcus unlocks his filing cabinets and retrieves the reference materials that he will need for conducting legal research. The research process involves consulting multiple sources of legal authority, including statutory laws, administrative regulations, judicial precedents, and scholarly commentaries. Each type of source provides different kinds of information and must be used according to specific procedures that ensure accuracy and completeness. The primary statutory authority for property disputes is the lex terrae dividendi, which Marcus has consulted many times during his career. However, water rights cases also involve provisions of the lex aquarum, a separate law that governs all aspects of water usage and allocation. The lex aquarum is a more recent law than the lex terrae dividendi, having been enacted only 47 years ago, but it has already been amended 6 times as new situations have arisen that were not anticipated by the original legislation. Marcus retrieves his copy of the lex aquarum from the reference section of his filing cabinet. The copy consists of 3 volumes bound in leather with bronze clasps that secure the volumes when they are not in use. The text is written in the standardized legal script used for all official publications, with wide margins that provide space for notes and cross-references. Marcus has added numerous annotations to his copy over the years, marking important passages and noting connections to other legal authorities. The research process begins with identifying the specific provisions of the lex aquarum that apply to disputes between agricultural users of water from natural streams. Marcus consults the detailed index contained in Volume 3, which lists all topics covered by the law and provides references to the relevant sections. The index is organized alphabetically by subject, with cross-references that connect related topics and help researchers locate all relevant provisions. Water rights for agricultural use are covered primarily in Chapter 7 of the Lex Aquarum, which contains 12 sections dealing with different aspects of water allocation and usage. Section 4 specifically addresses disputes between users whose properties are located along the same water source, while Section 8 covers the procedures for resolving such disputes through the legal system. Marcus must examine both sections carefully to understand how they apply to the specific facts of the case he is investigating. The text of Section 4 is written in the formal legal Latin that characterizes all Roman statutory language. The sentences are long and complex, with multiple clauses that specify various conditions and exceptions. Marcus reads through the section slowly, making notes on a wax tablet as he identifies the key provisions that will affect his analysis. The language requires careful interpretation because small differences in wording can have significant implications for how the law is applied. Section 4 establishes that water rights are determined primarily by the principle of prior usage, which means that users who have been drawing water from a source for a longer period of time generally have priority over more recent users. However, the law also recognizes several exceptions to this principle, including situations where prior usage was excessive or wasteful, where the water source has changed its natural course, or where new users can demonstrate that their need for water is essential for the public welfare. The application of these principles requires careful examination of the facts in each individual case, including documentation of when each user began drawing water from the source, how much water each user has been taking, and whether the usage patterns have changed over time. Marcus notes that he will need to request additional documentation beyond what he has already ordered, including records of water usage measurements and any previous agreements between the parties regarding water allocation. Section 8 outlines the procedural requirements for resolving water rights disputes through the legal system. The procedures are similar to those used for other types of property disputes, but with some special requirements that reflect the unique characteristics of water rights cases. For example, all water rights disputes must include testimony from a qualified hydraulic engineer who can assess the capacity of the water source and the reasonableness of the usage patterns claimed by each party. The law specifies that hydraulic engineers must be licensed by the College of Engineers and must have at least 5 years of experience in water management projects. The engineer's testimony must include measurements of the water flow at different times of the year, calculations of the maximum sustainable usage levels, and opinions about whether the current usage patterns are likely to cause long-term damage to the water source. Marcus makes a note that he will need to request the appointment of a hydraulic engineer for this case, following the procedures specified in Section 8 of the Lex Aquarum. The request must be submitted to the College of Engineers along with a detailed description of the water source, the location of the properties involved, and the nature of the dispute. The college will then assign an engineer who has no prior relationship with either party and who can provide an objective assessment of the technical issues involved. The appointment process for hydraulic engineers is governed by additional regulations contained in the Codex Technicus, a comprehensive manual that covers all aspects of technical expertise required for legal proceedings. Marcus retrieves this reference work from his collection, noting that it has been updated 3 times since he originally acquired it 7 years ago. The updates are filed separately in loose sheets that must be inserted into the appropriate sections of the main text, a process that requires careful attention to ensure that outdated information is properly replaced. The Codex Technicus specifies that requests for technical experts must be submitted using Form 18D, written in blue ink on grade A papyrus, with supporting documentation that demonstrates the necessity of expert testimony for the proper resolution of the case. The form must include a detailed description of the technical issues involved, the qualifications required for the expert, and an estimate of the time that will be required for the expert to complete his analysis. Marcus begins preparing Form 18D, consulting his notes about the water rights dispute to ensure that he provides all necessary information. The form requires him to describe the water source in precise terms, including its location relative to established geographical landmarks, its seasonal flow patterns based on historical records, and the number of users who currently draw water from it for various purposes. This information must be obtained from the survey records and water management documentation that he has already requested from the appropriate government offices. The process of completing Form 18D is complicated by the fact that Marcus does not yet have access to all the documentation that he needs. The form requires specific measurements and technical details that are contained in the survey records and water usage permits that are still being prepared by the various government offices. This means that Marcus must wait until those documents arrive before he can complete the expert appointment request, creating a dependency that could potentially delay the entire case. While waiting for the necessary documentation, Marcus turns his attention to other aspects of the case preparation that can be completed with the information currently available. He begins drafting the preliminary sections of his legal analysis, focusing on the general principles of water rights law and the procedural requirements that apply to all cases of this type. This preliminary work will provide a foundation for the more detailed analysis that will be completed once all documentation has been received. The drafting process follows the same methodical approach that Marcus uses for all legal writing. He begins with an outline that identifies the major topics to be addressed, the legal authorities that support each point, and the logical sequence in which the topic should be presented. The outline is written on a wax tablet that can be easily revised as new information becomes available or as the analysis develops in unexpected directions. The first section of the legal analysis must establish the jurisdiction of the court to hear the case, demonstrating that the dispute falls within the categories of cases that can be resolved through the legal system rather than through administrative procedures or private arbitration. Water rights cases generally fall within the jurisdiction of the civil courts, but there are some exceptions for cases involving public water sources, or cases that affect multiple provinces. Marcus consults the jurisdictional code to verify the specific requirements for establishing jurisdiction in water rights cases. The code is organized as a series of decision trees that guide legal practitioners through the process of determining which court system should handle each type of case. The decision trees are remarkably detailed, with dozens of branching points that depend on factors such as the value of the property involved, the citizenship status of the parties, the geographical location of the dispute, and the potential impact on public interests. For the water rights case currently under consideration, the jurisdictional analysis is relatively straightforward. Both parties are Roman citizens residing within the same judicial district. The water source is located entirely within Roman territory, and the dispute involves private property rights rather than public resources. These factors clearly establish that the case falls within the jurisdiction of the local civil court, following the standard procedures for property disputes. The second section of the legal analysis must identify and explain the relevant legal authorities, including statutory laws, administrative regulations, and judicial precedents. Marcus has already identified the primary statutory authorities in the Lex Aquarum, but he must also research whether any administrative regulations have been issued that provide additional guidance for interpreting the statutory provisions. Administrative regulations are issued by various government departments to clarify how statutory laws should be applied in specific situations. These regulations have the force of law within their respective areas of jurisdiction, but they cannot contradict or override the statutory provisions on which they are based. The regulations are updated more frequently than the statutes, sometimes several times per year, which means that legal practitioners must maintain current knowledge of regulatory developments in their areas of practice. Marcus consults the Registry of Current Regulations, a monthly publication that lists all administrative regulations currently in effect, along with summaries of any recent changes or amendments. The registry is organized by subject matter, with separate sections for different areas of law such as property rights, commercial transactions, family, relations, taxation, and water management. Marcus locates the section on water management and begins reviewing the regulations that have been issued during the past 2 years. The most recent regulation relevant to his case was issued 8 months ago by the Department of Hydraulic Resources. The regulation clarifies the procedures for measuring seasonal water flow variations and specifies the technical standards that must be used by hydraulic engineers when conducting assessments for legal proceedings. The regulation requires that all flow measurements be taken at standardized intervals throughout the year, using calibrated measuring devices that conform to specifications maintained by the Bureau of Technical Standards. Marcus makes careful notes about the new regulation, recording the specific citation numbers and effective dates that will be required when he references the regulation in his legal analysis. The citation format for administrative regulations is slightly different from that used for statutory laws, requiring additional information about the issuing department and the administrative authority under which the regulation was promulgated. As the morning progresses toward midday, Marcus continues his methodical research, consulting one reference work after another in the quiet rhythm that has characterized his career. The afternoon brings a messenger bearing the first of the verification documents that he requested for the Boundary Stone case. The genealogical records arrive in a sealed packet bearing the official seal of the Office of Genealogical Records, along with a certification letter attesting to the accuracy and completeness of the enclosed materials. Marcus carefully breaks the wax seal and examines the genealogical charts that document the family relationships of all parties and witnesses involved in the Boundary Stone dispute. The charts are drawn on high-quality papyrus using black ink, with family connections indicated by carefully drawn lines that connect names arranged in hierarchical patterns. Each name is accompanied by dates of birth and death where known, along with notations indicating tribal affiliations, citizenship status, and any relevant adoptions or marriages. The genealogical verification confirms that none of the witnesses are related to either party in the dispute, satisfying one of the requirements for establishing their credibility under Roman law. Marcus updates his case file with this information, noting the date on which the verification was received and filing the genealogical charts in the appropriate section of his document storage system. The remainder of the afternoon passes in the same measured pace, with Marcus alternating between research activities and administrative tasks that support the orderly progression of his cases through the legal system. The sun moves gradually across the sky, shifting the rectangle of light on his desk as the hours advance toward evening. The familiar rhythm of stylus against wax, pen against papyrus, continues uninterrupted, building toward the inevitable moment when another small piece of Roman justice will be complete and ready for submission to the appropriate authorities. As the day draws toward its close, Marcus performs the standard procedures for securing his office and preparing for departure. The oil lamp is carefully extinguished, the documents are locked in their designated storage locations, and the writing implements are cleaned and stored according to the prescribed methods. The same bronze key that unlocked his office in the morning now secures it for the night, completing another cycle in the endless rhythm of Roman legal administration. The walk home takes him through the same streets, past the same landmarks, following the same route that has structured his daily life for 14 years, 2 months, and 17 days. Tomorrow will bring new documents to review, new forms to complete, new verifications to request, and new analyses to prepare. The Boundary Stone dispute will advance one step closer to resolution. The water rights case will progress through its initial phases. Other cases will arrive, requiring the same careful attention to procedural detail and legal precision that characterizes all Roman legal practice. In the vast machinery of empire, Marcus Flavius represents just one small component, a single scribe among thousands who maintain the intricate system of laws and regulations that governs the daily lives of millions of citizens. His work may seem unremarkable, repetitive, even tedious to modern observers accustomed to dramatic legal proceedings and spectacular courtroom revelations. But in the quiet accumulation of properly documented facts, correctly formatted statements, and precisely worded conclusions, he participates in something far grander than any individual case or any single legal decision. He helps maintain the rule of law itself, that fundamental principle which distinguishes civilization from chaos, order from randomness, justice from mere power. Through the patient application of established procedures, the careful verification of evidence, and the methodical analysis of legal authorities, scribes like Marcus ensure that disputes are resolved according to consistent principles rather than arbitrary whims, that citizens receive equal treatment regardless of their social status or personal connections, and that the accumulated wisdom of centuries of legal development continues to guide the administration of justice. The system is not perfect. It is slow, complex, expensive, and sometimes frustrating for those who seek quick resolution of their disputes. But it works day after day, year after year, case after case, maintaining the stability and predictability that allow commerce to flourish, families to plan for the future, and communities to resolve their differences without resorting to violence. And so, as Marcus settles into sleep in his modest apartment, surrounded by the quiet sounds of a city at rest, he can take satisfaction in the knowledge that he has contributed to something larger and more enduring than his own brief existence. Tomorrow the sun will rise again, the citizens will wake to pursue their various activities, and the great wheel of Roman law will continue its steady revolution, grinding slowly but inevitably toward justice, one carefully written document at a time. And so the great wheel turns, as it has turned for centuries, as it will continue to turn long after Marcus Flavius has been replaced by another scribe, who will in turn be replaced by yet another, each one maintaining the same careful standards, following the same precise procedures, contributing their small part to the endless methodical accumulation of legal documentation that forms the backbone of Roman civilization. The rhythm never changes. Scratch, scratch, pause. The careful formation of letters, the measured application of ink to papyrus, the slow, deliberate construction of justice, one word at a time, one sentence at a time, one document at a time. Day after day, season after season, year after year, the work continues, performed by men whose names will be forgotten, but whose dedication to procedural accuracy ensures that the empire's legal system functions with the reliability of the sunrise itself. In the morning, Marcus will return to his office, unlock his cabinets, arrange his materials in their prescribed patterns, and begin another day of careful documentation. The boundary stone dispute will advance through its predetermined stages. The water rights case will progress according to established protocols. New cases will arrive, each one requiring the same meticulous attention to detail, the same patient verification of facts, the same methodical application of legal principles that have guided Roman jurisprudence for more than 8 centuries. And somewhere in the empire, in offices similar to Marcus's, other scribes are performing similar duties, maintaining the vast network of legal procedures that hold civilization together. They work in silence, in obscurity, in the gentle rhythm of administrative routine that forms the true foundation of Roman power. Not the dramatic conquests or the spectacular monuments, but the quiet, persistent accumulation of properly filed documents, correctly formatted reports, and precisely worded legal analyses. The system endures not because it is perfect, but because it is thorough. Not because it is swift, but because it is careful. Not because it provides dramatic resolution, but because it provides reliable procedure. In a world where so much is uncertain, where wars rage and empires fall, where natural disasters and human folly create constant upheaval, the Roman legal system offers something precious beyond measure: predictability. A citizen knows that if he follows the proper procedures, submits the correct forms, pays the appropriate fees, and waits the required amount of time, his case will be processed according to established principles. The outcome may not always be what he hopes for, but the process itself will be fair, thorough, and consistent with how similar cases have been handled in the past and will be handled in the future. This is the true terror of Roman law. Not the spectacular punishments or the dramatic trials, but the inexorable certainty of procedure. The knowledge that every action will be documented, every claim will be verified, every decision will be recorded and filed away in the vast archives that store the accumulated legal memory of the empire. Nothing escapes the patient attention of the scribes, nothing avoids the methodical application of established protocols. And so we reach the end of our journey through the quiet corridors of Roman legal administration. No dramatic revelations, no sudden twists, no climactic confrontations. Just the steady, eternal rhythm of bureaucracy in action, the soft scratching of stylus against wax, the careful formation of letters that will outlast the men who write them. If you found comfort in this gentle exploration of history's most methodical corner, perhaps you'll join us again for another journey into the beautifully mundane details of ancient civilization. Until then, may your own documents be properly filed, your own procedures correctly followed, and your own sleep as peaceful as the quiet satisfaction of work well done according to established protocols. The stylus rests, the ink dries, the empire sleeps, and tomorrow it all begins again.